Hey guys, so in this tutorial I'm going to do a video about anime hair highlights since that was a request, and I'm going to show you 9 different ways of doing the highlight on the crown of the head, and then I'm going to do a demo, and it's going to be sort of a hybrid of 2 of these methods, and I'm going to go into more detail with shading and everything. So first I'll talk about these ones here. So this first one is just a really basic highlight going across the crown of the head. It's just a solid block, and I did sort of a gradient going up, and I actually tried not to focus too much on the shading for the rest of them. I just did sort of a solid block of color because that's sort of separate from the highlights. So for ones that have a gradient like this, I thought it would be a good idea to include them. So it's just essentially a rectangle that follows the curve of the head, and then I sort of just blended it out into white, and that's pretty simple. And then this one here, I did sort of a zigzag highlight, and I don't know if I just suck at drawing these, but I just don't think it looks very good. I think maybe if it was a different hairstyle, it would look better. But again, I did a gradient, but that was not necessary. I just did zigzags, and the trick with this one is to be very irregular with the zigzags. Like, some go up higher, some are low, some come down lower, and just make it as random as you can. And I find it looks best if on either end there's the white line going down. See how I have that on both sides? If it's a line going up, it just kind of looks funny. It seems like the edge of the hair should have some white to it. So there's that one. This one, again, is a gradient, and it's similar to the first one. It's just a highlight across the head, but I sort of did it more irregular. I have little strandy pieces coming in like this, and you can see it almost looks like a zigzag if you look at the white, because some sections of the gray come up farther than others. And yeah, it's just overall a bit more blended than the first one, and this is actually one of my favorite ways of doing it. That's how I usually do it. And one thing you'll notice is sometimes I draw the highlight curving downwards, and sometimes it's going to be curving upwards, and it really depends. I like both ways, to be honest, and it's really personal preference. Alright, so moving on to the next one. This is when I started just doing solid block of color. Oh, and by the way, if you guys want this line art, I have it on my Tumblr, so I'll just leave a link to that picture in the video description, and then you can just print it off if you don't want to draw your own picture, if you just want to practice doing these. So yeah, with this one, again, it's just sort of a blocky style straight across. This one I didn't blend it in at all. It's just straight up white space. You can choose to blend it if you want, and it pretty much gets skinnier towards the middle and then wider towards the outside. And this one I think is a really cute style. Sometimes it's actually symmetrical on both ends, but there's pretty much, it's like a wide highlight here on this side, and then it tapers really, really fast, and there's just a skinny line across, and then maybe there's another little bubble of highlight over here. And another variation of this is to sort of eliminate this big bulge on the side and do a skinny highlight all the way across. I didn't draw that one out separate, but that's an alternative. And then I've seen this highlight quite a bit. It doesn't work at all with this style of hair. It needs to be more of a blocky style with blunt bangs, but it's pretty much a straight across rectangle block with little triangle teeth sticking into it. I don't really like that one. And then I did another triangle one, and it's just a thicker triangle. And again, I don't think it really worked with this style just because of how choppy the bangs are, but that's another alternative. And I also smudged it with my finger like this just to make it not so white, just to help it blend into the hair a little bit. Then we have this one here. It's sort of, I initially just drew sort of a U-shaped line, and then I did little squiggly sections of highlight. You can see the highlight's not all the way across. There's sections where it's colored in, and it's really irregular along the top and bottom, just very squiggly. And again, you have the option of blending it in more or leaving it more of a stark contrast. Then there's this last one here, and this is also similar to what I like doing. This one, how I planned it out was I drew ovals on each section of hair. I sort of actually extended the drawing because if you look at this one, see my line stops right here for the line art, but on this one I actually extended it to look more piecey, because if I'm drawing a more PC hairstyle, I like to have more PC highlights, so you can see each section of hair has its own little highlight. And yeah, like I said, I just did ovals, and then I shaded around the ovals, and then I just blended that shading into the top and bottom of the ovals to help it blend in a little bit more. And along the bottom I did little sort of flicking motions to help it blend in a little bit more. And I also added some highlights down on the bottom piece too. I usually don't make them as noticeable as the top ones, that's why I just left it out in all the other examples. But if I'm coloring each individual piece, then yes, wherever the hair bulges out on the lower section, I'll add a little highlight. So the way I'm going to be doing it on this drawing here is a hybrid of this one I just showed you, this one here, and this one. It's going to be piecey, but it's going to be blended more similarly to this one than as opposed to this one, which the highlights are kind of more pronounced and not quite as blended. So I'm using my 4B pencil. It's a Mars Lumograph pencil, and I'm using 4B because it just shows up better on camera. I find that my HB is just way too reflective. You can use whatever hardness of pencil you want. And first thing I'm going to do is make this look a bit more piecey. So I'm just going to extend these lines all the way up to the top. It doesn't matter if it looks a bit weird because like the way I'm going to be shading it, it's going to be covering a lot of this. If I was planning on making this a piecey hairstyle from the start, I wouldn't have drawn it exactly like this. But I'm just showing this part so you guys can know how to transform the line art I'm giving you if you want to do this technique. Extend this piece up. Bring this down and across, this one up, and I'll just break this up a little bit. That'll all be colored in anyway, so it doesn't really matter. Alright, so now I'm going to do sort of like I was mentioning with planning out where the highlights are going to be. I'm going to do the highlight that is a U shape upwards instead of a downwards U. I like to plan out the width of my highlight, sort of like this. And then I usually start with the biggest piece, like the big center piece. So I'm leaving a thin highlight along the edge right here, because I'm having my light source on this side, by the way. Make it a little sun with sunglasses, because sunglasses are cool. Always gotta draw shades on the sun. Okay. And I'm pretty much just doing sort of a flicky motion. And I'm trying to make it darkest towards the bottom of the strand. And do sort of the same thing coming down from the top. And all these strokes are going in the direction of the hair. And the trick is to sort of make them irregular. I don't want it to be a solid, you know, kind of like this first one here, where it was solid but it was blended. I want it more irregular than that. And with each new piece that I start, the first thing I do is draw that line where I want to leave the highlight. And this technique applies to color too. Like say I'm using my Copic markers, I'll just start off, you know, I'll just use different colors. Where it's darker, I'll use a darker color. Where it's lighter, I'll use a lighter color. With pencil, you can just use the same pencil. Sometimes I make the line go all the way across the highlight. And I really don't pay attention if I go out of the lines a little bit like that. I'll just erase that later. This one I'm sort of changing up the way I do it because this side of this strand would be pretty covered and in shadow, so I'm just making that side a bit darker. And the highlight is more towards the outside of the strand. Sort of same for this guy. These pieces of hair would be casting a shadow down onto this piece. So I'm going to add some shadow there, and there'll be just a little bit of highlight. There'll be a bit of shadow here where this piece is casting a shadow down here. And then I'll do my usual highlight. This piece isn't going to have much of a highlight at all. And underneath her chin, I'm going to completely color that in. And yeah, that is pretty much it. I'm just going to be doing the same thing on the rest of it. I won't fast forward through any of this. I'll do it all real time. But if you don't like that, feel free to skip ahead. Most of the time I do sort of a mid-tone first, get the placement of the highlight, and then I go back, do the darker part. This section here won't really have much of a highlight at all. I'll just leave it a little bit light. You see, I didn't actually leave it white, but it is still lighter in the middle. This is one of those cases where I started dark and then I gradually got lighter. You can see my technique's never really consistent, which is fine, as long as you get the look you're going for. And I'm going to color in this section completely. And then on these two I'll have a bit of a highlight. And yeah, that is essentially it. Then just go back and tweak things. And if you don't want this highlight to be completely white, you can smudge it with your finger. I'm not going to do that. Or you can use like a Q-tip or any smudging tool. But I'm just going to end that there and erase the little bit on top with my little pumpkin eraser, since that's what I have on me right now. And then I'll also erase these lines, the guidelines for where I wanted to place the highlights. Mr. Sun can stay there, because he's cool. And yeah, that is pretty much the tutorial. I hope that gives you guys some ideas on how to do highlights in anime hair. And I just want to say thanks for watching, and remember the link to this line art is in the video description. Thanks guys, bye!